So today I'm going to talk about two topics, kind of like last time. I'm going to start off with goal setting, and then we will go into a little bit more detail on the college recruiting process. So we'll kind of pick up where we left off with the college process. And if you weren't here for my first talk, you'll still have an opportunity to touch briefly on some of the college concepts that I covered last time I was in town. But I'm going to start off with goal setting. And the value of this particular topic is that when we talk about mental performance, or we talk about sports psychology, obviously we're talking about what's happening in your mind, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, but ultimately the impact of what your thoughts and feelings are is going to be determined by how they affect your actions. So when I explain sports psychology to athletes and to parents, I really try and emphasize that it's not a magic pill where suddenly you feel differently about yourself and then all the times just become much faster like magic. What it is that you have a better understanding of how to regulate what you're feeling and what your thoughts are so that you act differently. And ultimately, over time, it's the things that you do that lead to change, meaningful change, especially in sports, which is a physical medium. So we're going to talk about goals today because goals are going to anchor our actions. And there's so many different layers to the goal setting process. And it seems simple, seems really intuitive, as it should, but having a better understanding of the process from start to finish and how to plan will help inform your actual day-to-day actions in a way that can help you to be more efficient with what you're doing. Okay? So I want to show you goals from the perspective of it being like a road trip. All right? I want to go on a road trip to California, for example. I need to know, first and foremost, where I want to go. If I want to chart a path, figure out the most efficient way to drive from Chandler to San Diego, for example, I need to first of all figure out where am I going? Am I going to San Diego? Am I going to Irvine? What part of California do I want to go to? And then from there, you're going to work backwards. You're going to figure out, all right, now that I know what the objective is, I know where I'm going, how am I going to get there? What's the most efficient path? And so goals are much like a roadmap in that sense, that if you know what it is that you want from a macro perspective, big things, what are the things that I most want in life? What are the things I most want out of swimming? What are my long-term goals? Then you can start to create a plan which will articulate, okay, if I want to go to the Olympics someday in 10 years, then what am I going to do for the next 10 years, year over year to get there? What am I going to do this season, season by season to get there? And then what am I going to do every single week, every single day so that I'm moving in that direction? So that's going to be one big piece of what we're going to talk about today is understanding how to use your big ideas, your big goals to inform your day-to-day processes. And then the second thing I want you to be thinking about as we talk about it today is the fact that that road is not straight, right? So you see it's very curved, and that's life, right? We have these outcome goals. We have these big things that we really, really want in life. We don't always get them. Sometimes we get them, we don't get them when we want them. Sometimes we get them, but it doesn't come together the way that we anticipated that it would. And so understanding also that just by having goals does not necessarily mean that you're always going to achieve them in general, when you want to, in the way that you want to, is really important to understand that goals are there to guide you. They're not there to be a test, right? So failing to achieve a goal in general, or failing to achieve a goal when you want one, is in and of itself not a failure. It doesn't mean that you didn't achieve. It just means that that particular goal, either you needed to set a different goal, or you're not ready, or there's more processes that need to occur. So understanding that goals are there to help us make good choices, but not to make us feel bad about ourselves when we fail to reach those. And so when we look at this goals as a roadmap, these are the components of goals that I'm going to talk about today. Starting with, working backwards, our outcome goals. And these things are going to be twofold. We're going to talk about our big ideas, like why am I swimming? And then some other long-term things, like when my career is over, what are some things I'm shooting for? What are some things I'm striving for? And then that's going to inform everything that comes before it. performance goals, both long-term and short-term, and what that means we'll talk about, but the difference between a goal for this season versus a goal for our championship meet that might be coming up in a couple of weeks. Those are the difference between long-term and short-term goals. Process goals, okay, I know what I want. What do I need to do to get there? Like, what are some things that I need to improve on every day that are going to help me achieve these long-term and short-term goals? And then daily actions, right? If I want to get better, let's say hypothetically at underwater dolphin kicking, what do I need to do every single day so that I actually can improve at that thing that I said is important to help me get to my long-term goals? All right, and so we start here. This is where we are today, and by knowing where we're going, we're going to chart out a path to get there. So think about goals again as a form of, if nothing else, motivation for daily action. That by having a purpose, by having a plan, you know every day what you're supposed to be doing. And then on those days that the alarm clock goes off and it's morning practice, or like today it's cold and it's a day after Thanksgiving, you're like, I don't know if I want to go to practice or not. You're able to lean on those short-term goals, those long-term goals, those outcome goals as reasons to get out of bed, to bring yourself to practice, to do those little things that, let's be honest, like we don't always want to do, right? Like you don't always want to eat healthy food. You don't always want to go to bed early. You don't always want to wake up to go to practice. But knowing your why helps inform that decision, helps make it easier to make the right choice. So that's what goals are really about. But you have to have them to have that motivation. So we're going to start with outcome goals. Like I said, we got to work backwards. Otherwise it doesn't work. Like, you got to know why you're doing this in the first place. And so I look at outcome goals as having two prongs or having two components. The first is going to be your biggest long-term goals for the sport of swimming. And this can change, right? This can evolve over time. Maybe as you get better, you alter your goal. Maybe you achieve one, so you set a new one. But I want you to think about things like, is it to swim varsity in high school? Maybe for you that's like the biggest long-term goal in swimming. You want to make the varsity team. Maybe you want to make the state meet as a relay swimmer. And that to you is like what makes the most sense. You have other goals as well outside of swim. But for you, that's the most meaningful long-term goal. Maybe it's something bigger. It's making your Arizona Senior State meet. Maybe it's swimming in college at different levels, Division III, Division II, Division I. Maybe it's going all the way to make the Olympics. All these things, people do these things. The probability of doing them obviously is different depending on what the goal is. But they're all really long-term goals. These are goals that could take you 3 years, 5 years, 10 years to achieve, right? So they're important because that's, for a lot of us, like one of the things that really motivates us to come to practice every day. But they're also really far away. So you can't fixate on them because it's gonna take some time to get there, and because we're projecting so far out, there's no guarantee you're gonna achieve those goals, right? If your goal is to make the Olympics, it's really, really hard to make the Olympics. It's a great goal, something that helps get you out of bed, something that brings you to practice. But if it's 10 years from now, who knows, right? But it's good to know what that goal is, because on the hardest days, the days you least want to do things, those are the things that give us the most motivation. And then the second type of outcome goal that I want you to consider are your reasons for swimming in the first place that are independent of actual performances, right? These are things like, I'm a part of a swim team because I love having friends who share this interest with me. Or I love how swimming holds me accountable. That it's like one of the parts of my life where if I work really hard, I see the impact of my hard work. And that's really meaningful for me. It makes me feel better about myself. It informs my self-confidence, my self-worth, right? Or I like that swimming is really hard. And it's one of the hardest things I do. And so it shows me how tough I am physically or how mentally tough I am. It challenges me and I overcome these challenges and I love the way that feels. Those are the types of things, your values, that inform the reason that you swim, right? And those things are true always, regardless of whether you achieve your big long-term goals, whether you achieve your seasonal goals, or you achieve your taper meet goals for 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now, right? And those things are very, very essential to driving our daily actions, because these are things that are in your control, right? right? You can always count on swimming to provide you opportunities to be mentally tough. You can always count on swimming to provide you opportunities to connect with other people, to be a source of accountability that shows you I'm someone who can commit to something and follow through. So what you have to do is reflect on what are those things for you. And it's different for all of us. I think about myself personally, and I've talked to you guys about like doing triathlons, right? And one of the things I love about triathlons is that it's a very mentally demanding activity. And I enjoy that because it's an opportunity to show myself how mentally tough I am. And so when I do really hard things as part of triathlons, when it's really difficult, I lean on that core value to help me through the most difficult moments. Give you like a concrete example. When I did my Ironman triathlon in California, it was basically 2.5 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and a 26 mile run, about 14-hour race. So the bike took me about just under 8 hours to complete. And there were 20 mile per hour winds that day in California, crosswinds, headwinds. It was very, very difficult 8-hour trip for me on the bike. And so during that time, I leaned very heavily on the core value of this is a test of my mental toughness. Physically, my body will be able to do this if I continue to ask it to, but mentally it's very tempting to want to give up. You know, the cut lines coming up, lots of reasons in your mind to want to quit in that situation. The pain is significant. But I would rely a lot on you're mentally tough. This is an opportunity for you to demonstrate that. This is something that not everybody has. There are going to be people that are going to quit during the bike, people that are not going to make the cutoff, and I take pride in the fact that I'm not going to because it's a demonstration of my mental toughness. So for me, I tell that story because that resonates with me, right? Other values, like maybe discipline, maybe wouldn't have the same effect for me. When I'm in the middle of that bike, I'm like, oh, I'm so disciplined. It doesn't really land. It doesn't make me feel better about myself. So you need to reflect on what is that core value or those set of core values that connect with you, the things that you're most proud of about yourself, and the things that when you hear them, maybe someone says them to you or you say them to yourself, you're like, yeah, that makes me feel really good about myself. Those are your core values. Those are the things you most care about. And it can be different for everyone. So both are important because these things are really wonderful carrots to strive for. Imagining making the Olympics is like so emotionally motivating. But you don't have full control. So you also need to have things that drive you that you are in complete control of, and that's your core values. So I encourage you to have both in an effort to inform the direction that you're heading with your swimming. And here's an example of some of those things. This is not all encompassing at all. There's like hundreds of core values, but things like I'm a great teammate, I'm mentally tough, I have a great attitude when things are difficult, I care about other people, I'm kind, I'm empathetic, I'm disciplined. Those are examples of core values. So I want you to pick a value right now. I want you, as I'm talking, think about what would be a value that motivates you, and then let's put them up on the slide. So if you have your phone, you can pull it out, scan the QR code, and pick one, or maybe more than one if you'd like, value, a characteristic, an adjective that describes you, that you really resonate with, that you really care about. And if you don't have your phone, that's fine. You could even share if you want to, if you feel comfortable sharing. But I love the slide up because, you know, not everybody feels comfortable sharing, and this is anonymous, and it'll pop up, and no one will know that it's you. Yeah. If it's meaningful for you, I want to get better. That's perseverance, toughness, friendship.
Gotta get better.
Maybe your relationship with your coaches, your demonstrate to them that you are a hard worker, disciplined. These are good. Anyone else who doesn't have a phone feel like they have something they want to share? Yeah.
Never give up.
Yeah, so perseverance, not giving up. It's a great one, right? And to give an example of like where you could use that, right? You guys said 6 200 flies today, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is what I heard, yeah. What a great core value to connect to in the middle of 6 200 fly. Do I want to do 6 200 fly? No. Is it extremely difficult? Yes. But I'm somebody who's mentally tough. I'm somebody who never gives up. I persevere when things are difficult. That can be the thing that guides your decision making in that moment to either get out and go to the bathroom and skip 2 of those 200 flies, or say, you know what, I don't want to do that because that's not consistent with my core values, with the things that I believe to be true about myself. So that's the value of those values. And be reflecting. We'll have an opportunity to talk about where they go. How do I write them down? How do I refer to them in just a minute? But be thinking about what that is for you. Okay, so then the next level, the next tier, are performance goals. You talk about these like very, very long-term, multi-year goals, or even just things that motivate us to participate in the first place. But then there are more immediate things that we want as a part of doing all this hard work, making this commitment, showing up, doing things that are physically and mentally demanding. And so these are performance goals, and they can be both short and long-term. And it's a bit subjective, so what it means for something to be short-term and long-term depends on your trajectory and your timeline. But I'll give you some options and some things to think about relative to both of these concepts. And the first are long-term goals. You think about long-term goals as being like end-of-season goals, or maybe even taper cycle goals, right? So this could be something as like long-term as at the end of this season, maybe the end of the summer or the end of the short course season, this is like a time that I want to achieve, this is a cut that I want to make, this is a team that I'm hoping to qualify for. It could also be, you know, I want to go this time at high school state, because that'll be my first opportunity to shave, taper, and wear a tech suit. I want to go these times at the December championship meet, then I want to go these times in March, and then I want to go these times in the summer. So those could all be considered to be long-term goals in some capacity because they're performance goals specific to a time that you want to achieve or a cut that you want to make. And they're going to take time to get there, right? You're going to train for weeks and months in an effort to achieve those goals. So these are concrete, I think very important to understand, meaning that these goals should be things that you can measure, like a time that you want to achieve or a cut time that you're trying to get underneath. Something that you can actually say, did I achieve it, yes or no? And I'll tell you in a minute why that's so important. We want to be able to connect it to what you're doing in practice in an objective, measurable way. So having a specific time, like I want to go 149 in the 200 free, is going to inform our training better than I want to go fast in the 200 free. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be fast? What does it mean to get better? You should define it in a way that you can measure. And then, as I'll show you in a minute, a very good example of these things should inform your training. So if I want to go 149 in the 200 free, the value of that is that I can think about, well, what is 149 in the 200 free? What do I have to hold every 50? What do I need to hold every 100? And then I can think about, well, what should I be doing in practice that will demonstrate that I'm ready to go 149, 200 free? That value is twofold. One thing is that it's very helpful to know, oh my gosh, like I'm training to go 149, so that gives you confidence, right? And it's also a form of accountability that am I actually ready to do this or not, and motivates you on a daily basis. And it gives you information that if I'm not going the times that I need to go 149, then I might need to change something or improve on something so that it's more realistic for me to achieve that goal. And these things also are stepping stones to our outcome goals. So if you think about like that goal of swimming Division I, well, how do you get there? You're going to need to take a lot of steps. You might be many steps away if you're 13 years old right now from the times that you need to go to swim at a Division I college. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it just because there's 7 steps from here to there. But you should know what those steps are, and you need to take the steps. So you need to make the high school state meet. Then you need to make speedo sectionals. Then you need to make futures and you need to make winter juniors, you should know what those steps are and then take them in sequence. And it helps to know that there are steps and to know that there's a sequence so that you don't get discouraged. If you're thinking, well, I need to go 136 200 free to swim Division I and I currently go 145, that feels a million miles away, like you'll never get there. But if you think about it more in terms of, okay, 145 represents a speedo sectional cut. My next goal is to go 143 to make futures. After that, I want to go 141 to make winter juniors and so on and so forth. Then it feels like, okay, I can get there. I'm going to take it in steps. So that's the value of long-term goal setting. And on our next slide, I'm going to show you an example of a set that is structured around long-term goals. And then I want you to reflect on what do you do in practice that might be consistent or similar to that concept. And then the second type of goal is short-term goals. And again, this is a little subjective, right? So if I talked about things like having a time you want to go at high school state, having a time you want to go at the December meet, having a time you want to go in March, those could be long-term goals. Those could even be short-term goals towards your long-term goal of making futures at the end of the short course season. But they could even be more short-term than that. Short-term goals could be things like, all right, I really want to go a best time at my mid-season meet in December, so I know I've got to swim this meet at Chandler High in a Speedo or a non-tech suit, and I won't be tapered, I'll be very tired. So how am I going to motivate myself to try at this high school meet or to try at this early season meet on a Saturday or Sunday when I know that I'm not probably going to go my best time? Well, I'm going to set a short-term goal to give that early season meet meaning so that I am consistent with my preparation for it, so that the way that I approach the meet is the best that I can, that I work really hard in the meet, that I try really hard. And maybe that goal isn't even your best time. Maybe it's something that's 3% slower than your best time or 5% slower, but it's a good stepping stone towards being prepared to swim past your taper meet. Short-term goals can also involve, to some degree, some elements of your process. So it could be things like, I want to add only 2 seconds to my 100 fly, and I want to commit to kicking underwater 15 off every wall for the entire race. So there could be a degree of process and performance concepts nestled into your short-term goals. But the value of them is they give you a chance for small wins, which we talked, I think, a little bit about last time. Basically, it's hard to motivate ourselves when we're really far away from those moments where we feel confident that we're going to perform our best, right? Let's be honest, in this sport, you swim really fast a few times a year. You know, you don't often get to wear the tech suit, you don't always get to shave, you don't always get to taper. So a lot of the times you're committing to, I'm going to go to this 3-day meet in the middle of October, and I'm probably not going to go very fast. I'm not going to go my best times, or maybe I'm not going to drop very much. So it's hard because you don't feel like you're winning very often. You don't get that reinforcement that comes from getting better. But if you have small short-term goals, then it feels like even when I'm not achieving those big things that I really want, that I am achieving things that I know are leading me towards my long-term goals. And that feeling of accomplishment, it's addictive, it's reinforcing. It makes you want to keep training and coming to practice and pushing yourself in these meets. So it's really important to give yourself opportunities every day, every week, to experience success in some form. And setting short-term goals is a really good way to set yourself up to see success every day, every week. So that's another value of short-term goals. And I'm going to give you an example of an athlete that I train and some of the short-term goals that she set and how her progression went, so that you can see how you can utilize short-term goals to inform your long-term objectives. Okay, so this is an example of a set that I would do with my club team. Every season, usually like 3 to 6 times a year. It's 12 50s on the 130 interval. So about a minute of rest, right? You pick one stroke, typically your best stroke. Maybe you do 12 50s fly and 130, and you hold the fastest time that you can hold for those 12 50s. And the objective here is to be consistent with these times, to go the fastest you can on each one, and then it's a predictive set that will demonstrate your preparedness to go a goal time in 100 of stroke. So I'm giving you 3 examples of swimmers doing this set about a month or 2 prior to their taper meet. This would be in January, so you can assume that they've done a lot of training, so they're pretty fit because it's in the middle of the season. It's pretty close to their taper meet, so they're tired, but they're getting to a point where they're going to be ready to swim fast. In February and March is typically when we would taper for that group. And they would have done the set a few times, so you can assume that this is maybe like the 4th or 5th time they've done this set. So we have here on the top a swimmer who's a female breaststroker, and she did 1250s breaststroke. In the middle we have a female butterflyer, and she did 1250s fly. On the bottom we have a male butterflyer, 1250s fly. His best time in the 100 fly, around 49, 100 fly. Her best time when she finished was about 55, 100 fly. She was 102 long course 100 fly, and then she was a 102 100 breaststroker. Okay, so give you a little bit of idea of kind of the numbers. So the breaststroker, she averaged 33.3 on the 1250s breaststroke, and her splits when she went her best time at senior Mets, her senior championship meet a month later when she won senior champs, was 29.6, 33.3. So you see that the average that she held on the 1250s perfectly mirrored her second 50 of her 100, allowed her to achieve her goal time, which was a winter juniors cut, and to win the state championship meet. Okay? This is an example of knowing the goal. I want to go 102, I want to break 103 this season. How do I do that? Well, my splits are probably going to look something like this. And we can talk, when I work with individual athletes, I talk about, okay, what are the typical differences between your first and second 50 and 100, or maybe the difference between your 350s, last 350s of a 200. But typically it's like maybe 4 seconds for a 100 breaststroke. So here we see this set being predictive of the second 50 of the 100, and she was able to execute accordingly. The value of that is that she knows, as we're going through the 5-6 months preceding the championship meet, that she needs to be there to get where she wants to go. The 33.3 is the magic number, right? There's plus or minus, which is why I'm showing you the other 2 in just a second. You can go a little slower, you can go a little faster, but she knew that she's going 33.3s in practice on 1250s. I can go 102 100 breaststroke because I know that that number is going to be the second 50 of my 100. So now that motivates everything she does. It motivates her during the 1250s. When it gets hard, you get to number 7 and you feel like you want to throw up and your body's full of lactic acid and you can't move. But it's like, it's worth it because I know if I do this set well, I'm setting myself up to get my goal. It also helped inform her long-term process, like coming to morning practice every day, going to the weight room, going to bed early, doing her recovery concepts, like she had compressant pants that she would wear before she went to bed to help her legs recover. Doing all those things because she knew that, hey, I'm on track. I'm on track to achieve my goal. And then even those sets that helped her be prepared to do that. So doing 6 200 breaststroke or doing the distance group once a week. She knew all those things were part of helping her be able to do this. And in the beginning of the season, she wasn't going 33.3s. She was going 34s, and she was going, 34 mids. But that's what motivated her to get there, was the knowledge that I'm a second away. I'm going to do all the things that I need to do to make that possible so that I can get to the goal. So that's why the long-term goal is important. Because if you don't know that the goal is 102, then you don't know that 33 is what you're supposed to be holding the 1250s. So when you're doing 1250s, you're just doing 1250s. And you're like, how's practice? I don't know, it was fine. I did 1250s. Versus, I held 33.3s today, and that's exactly what I'm supposed to be holding to get to my goal. Does that make sense? And then just really quickly, I'll give you a couple other examples. Annabelle, this swimmer, she's somebody who gets really, really tired. She's a much stronger, muscular girl. And so she infrequently was able to go exactly the times that she needed to go to get to her specific goal. She was holding 30.7s on this set, but she ended up finishing 29.7 at the end of the season in her 100 fly. And it tells a story of a couple things. First of all, when you're doing sets like this, if you are a little bit off, that does not necessarily mean that you're doing a bad job. Everybody is different. Some people go a little faster than the target. Some people go a little slower than the target. There's lots of explanations for that. You should reflect on what the explanations are for you. In her case, she was a very hard worker, extremely consistent. So her being a little bit off, in my mind, and much of what I would communicate with her is that it's okay. You're trying to get there. That's the value. The value is that the 30.7s don't become 31.5s because she's feeling frustrated or because she doesn't know the connection between her times and her goal. But she doesn't have to necessarily go 29.7s to make it meaningful. For her, understanding her body, that she's going to taper better with more recovery, that's important. And the other message that sends is every day is different. So some days you're going to come in, you're feeling sick, you're feeling tired, and you're not going to go to 29.7s, you're going to go 30.7. The goal on that day is to try and make sure that 30.7s don't become 31.0s and 31.3s and 31.5s and 31.8s. That you do everything you can to keep it as close to that 30.7 as possible, even on the bad days. And then on the good days, if you go 30.3s or 29.9s, awesome. And she had those days too. And then on the bottom, I have a swimmer who held 25.9s on the set, but he was 26.5 at the end of his 100 fly. A couple reasons for that. Some swimmers, they recover more easily than others, and so in practice, they swim faster than they do in taper meets, or they don't improve as much in taper meets because of the physiology of their body, and it's important to understand that about yourself. If you're that type of swimmer, it's really important that you challenge yourself consistently. If you recover well, you have to push yourself really hard a lot of the time. Something that he struggled with in the set, as you can see from the data, is he had a hard time pushing himself in the beginning of the set. So he was going 27.2 on the beginning of the set when he's freshest, and then he gets down to 24.7 at the end of the set, right? So a swimmer who recovers well doesn't quite know how to push himself appropriately in this set, and so he isn't able to translate the set as well to his end of season goal. But that's still important information because we can have that conversation now, swimmer and coach, where I can say, Hudson, you have to start off faster in this rate, in this set to get where you want to go. And instead of him hearing coach saying, Hudson, you're doing a bad job, he's hearing me say, no, objectively, I see why I need to be better, right? So instead of it being a criticism that has no data behind it, it's a dialogue with a coach and a swimmer about, you want to finish 25.9, you can do that, we just need to be a little bit better at how we're doing the set. And then he can go, okay, you're right, I get it, I understand. You're trying to help me, you're not just getting upset with me for not doing the set as well as it could be done, right? But again, if he doesn't know what the goal time is, and he doesn't know that the objective is to go 25.9 at the end of that 100, then we can't have that conversation. Then all that's happening is me and him saying, Hudson, that needs to be better. And he's like, why? I'm trying as hard as I can, right? So that's the value of setting long-term goals and how it can connect to your training. Make sense? So think about what that means for you. What sets do you do that can connect to your goals? And if you don't have goals, that's why we want to have them. Okay, and then short-term goals, really quickly. So this is an example of the relationship between your short-term goals and your long-term goals. This is a swimmer that I coached whose best time in the 100 backstroke, female athlete, is 53. She is one of the fastest swimmers in the Ivy League currently. She made the NCAA championships last year. But she's not going to always go her best time every time she swims in a meet. In fact, she only went to 53 maybe once or twice a year. A lot of the time she's going 55s and 56s. And for many of us, especially young athletes, we get really frustrated when we go to any meet and we don't improve. It's human nature. It is natural to want to get better all the time at everything that we do. Feels good to get better, doesn't feel good to feel stuck or feel like you're getting worse. But in swimming, getting better doesn't always look like dropping time. It is relative to where you are in the adaptation process. Am I tired? When am I tapering? How much work have I done? Has my body really adapted yet and improved? And so it's really important to be able to set short-term goals that you can focus on to help guide you towards the long-term goal, that give meaning to the parts of the season where you're probably not going to go your best time. So this is an example of how you can do it. End of the season, she was 53.5 on the 100 back. Let's assume that leading into that meet, her best time was 55.0. Okay, so in New York, we do the high school girls season about the same time as Arizona. So you can look at high school divisionals as being like maybe just a regular dual meet, maybe something that's a little bit like regionals. So a goal for her might be, I'm gonna be a second and a half off my best time when I put a suit on, but I'm not tapered and it's in like late October. Then the high school sectional meet is a really big deal in New York. It's a trials finals opportunity. It's kind of like high school state. And so there, okay, I want to go to high school state, let's say in Arizona, and I want to be close to my best time. My best time is 55.0. I think a really good goal would be to be 56.0 in the prelims, go 55.5 in finals. This is still a second or a half a second slower than my best time, but I recognize that if I want to go 53.5 at the end of the season, that going within a second of my best time in November is a really good goal. So this is a swimmer that can walk away from a taper meet in November, not drop time, but be like, I'm doing a really good job because I'm moving in the direction of where I want to go. Understanding where she is in the training like cycle and staying focused on these meets where maybe physiologically it's going to be a little harder for her to go her best. And then, let's say in December, just like many of you, you might go to like a December championship meet in club. Her goal is to maybe go a little bit faster than her best time. It's not her long-term goal. Her long-term goal is to go 53, but getting closer to it in December is going to help her get there. So oftentimes as swimmers, what we struggle with is I want to go 53 this season, and then I go to the high school meet and I go 55, and I think, I'm having a terrible season. I'm not going to get to 53. And it's a lack of understanding of how this process typically works. But if you have these goals already on paper, then your whole perspective's different. So then when you go that 54.5 in December, you go that 55.5 in November, instead of being frustrated, instead of feeling like I'm not on track, you're like, oh, awesome, I hit my short-term goal. Those are my stepping stones. They're going to help me get to the 53.5. And then at the end of the season, the 53.5 does happen, and she does see that time. And this was the trajectory for her. When she dropped down to 53 for the first time, it didn't happen all at once. It was 55s and 56s and many, many repetitions of being within a second of her best time and just being on top of her best time. And then at the very, very end, when we had put together the entire season of work and the taper and all of those repetitions, then we saw the breakthrough. Then we saw the 53.5. But she was excellent. We would meet every season and we would sit down and we would do all this work. We would set up a logbook, we would set up goals, and so she had all these goals just like this that helped keep her focused throughout the season so that she could get where she wanted to go and be mentally feeling confident when we got there. Make sense? Okay. All right, so a great question to ask when we talk about these numbers is, okay, it sounds very straightforward. If I want to go 53 in the 100 backstroke, I've got to go 55 in November. If I want to go 102 100 breaststroke, I've got to hold 33s on the 1250s. But what if you're not doing those things right now, right? What if right now when you do 50s breaststroke, you're going 35s? How do you go from 35s to 33s? That's a really good question. How do I get there? How do I actually get better? And that's what process goals are for. So it's really important to know where you're going, because otherwise, what's the point in improving your technique or pushing yourself into 600 flies if you don't have a goal? But then if you have a goal, how do I actually improve? So we need to think about the actions that we want to take on a daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal basis that are going to actually help us to get better, make us stronger, improve our endurance, make us more efficient, help us to recover more quickly. Anything that you do on a daily basis that is going to improve your capacity as an athlete in some way. That's the whole point of coming to practice. Practice is process. So we want to actually identify those things in a concrete way and understand, like, these are things that I want to improve on, and this is how I'm going to improve on them, so that when you come to practice, you have purpose, you have intention. You're not just following directions, you're actively trying to get better at something. You're focusing on something every day. So these things include training concepts. Could be things like how consistently you attend. Could be the quality of training sets, like the set of 1250s, like doing the whole set of 600 fly, maybe the way you do the set, 600 fly. Technical concepts, this is a technical sport. It's not just an endurance sport. So you need to improve both in your fitness and your speed and your strength, as well as your efficiency in this sport. How do I move through the water more efficiently by being more streamlined? How do I better position things in the water, like my feet, my head, my hands, so that I pull more water, so that I float better, so that my kick is more efficient? Those are all concepts that are process-based, that if you improve the technique of your kick, or you're more streamlined coming off the wall, you will travel faster through the water. So those are things that we should be incorporating into process goals. Lifestyle things, I've talked a lot today about recovery, right? Like being able to do the set well is predicated on how quickly I recover. Being able to be consistent at practices is predicated on not getting sick and being able to be consistent with attendance. Even things like balancing the stress of school and your social life with your goals as an athlete is part of the process of contributing to how you're going to get better on a daily basis. So those things that you do away from a pool, whether it's managing your stress, whether it's having good habits for sleep, whether it's fueling yourself during practice by incorporating carbohydrate consumption and fluids and electrolytes, are all things that are process-based that can make you better. And the mental side of things as well. Some of us, we do a lot of these things that we talked about at a high level, but when we come to the race, we don't have a pre-race routine, or we don't know how to talk to ourselves, or we haven't set goals. And so even though our physical approach is very strong, there are things that are standing in the way from a mental perspective. And hopefully what we talked about when I was here last time was a good step in the right direction towards helping you better understand those things. But these are all examples of the things that you can incorporate into your process goals that will help you make that 35.0 in breaststroke a 30.5. And make it as concrete as possible, right? So instead of saying, I want to get better at underwater dolphin kicking, which is like the most common thing I hear. It's like, oh, what do you need to get better? My underwaters need to be better. Well, what does that mean, right? Like, how do you get better at underwaters? Getting better at underwaters means I need to improve an element of my dolphin kick. Well, what part? Do you need to have more amplitude? Do you need to have a bigger kick? Do you need to bend your knees less with your kick? Do you need to work on your ankle flexibility? Is it breath control? Do you need to hold your breath for longer? What types of sets will help you better hold your breath? Do you need to commit to the concept more? Like, I can be fast underwater, but I don't incorporate them into my races. So I need to start practicing taking 4 kicks off the wall instead of just 1. So many specific details that you could incorporate that would actually help you get better at underwaters. That's meaningful versus I just need to get better at underwaters. You see the distinction? So, and I gave you so many things. There is no perfect answer to that, right? You start with any of those things and you'll start getting better. And you can start picking as you improve on the next concept and the next concept. So don't feel like it needs to be perfect. It doesn't. Just make sure it's specific. So these are things, again, like measurable. I want to be stronger in the weight room. I want to go from 125-pound squat to 145-pound squat for 5 repetitions. That's representative of an improvement in strength. Or I want to get 8 hours of sleep on average per night instead of 7. That's something that's measurable that you can actually record and hold yourself accountable to, okay? So all of these things, these process concepts, should be concepts that are just a little bit more difficult than what you're currently doing, so they're challenging but attainable, and they should be things that you can measure. And where I would start with process goals is with daily action, daily intention, because that's all we can control, okay? I cannot do a week's worth of underwater dolphin kicking today. The only thing I can do today is today's underwater dolphin kicking, and that's it. So we must start with a commitment to daily action, and that will allow us to then work towards process goals that we incorporate weekly, monthly, and seasonally. And I'll put this all together in a minute in like a goal sheet so you can kind of see how it all connects, but this will be our last goal concept. So accountability checklist to me is a really good starting point for building in daily intentions that are a form of process goals, all right? And this is an example of a template that I have. I'll send it to John and Michelle so that you can play with it if you'd like. And the purpose of this is to have 10 things that you hold yourself accountable to every single day. And it really helps us to be able to visualize what I'm supposed to be doing every day, and then it's a small win to be able to check it off on a daily basis. These are things like going to practice. Like today, one of the biggest things that's going to help me get better is to go to practice instead of not going to practice. Check it off when I do it. Could be coming 15 minutes early because when I show up right on time, I end up getting in the water late, I'm rushed, I forgot my equipment bag, then I can't do a set as well. So I'm going to come 15 minutes early so I can do a dynamic warm-up. My shoulders feel better. I don't have to sit out some of the practice because my shoulders hurt. I'm able to do the full warm-up, so I'm feeling prepared for that set of 50s. I'm warmed up so that I don't go slow in the first 3 or 4 of them. I'm ready to go. Could be things like I'm going to set my own alarm for AM practice, so I'm not so reliable on my parents to do it for me. This is something that, this is mine, I take ownership over it, and I'm going to do that every single day. Could be recovery oriented. I'm going to bring a Gatorade to practice every day. I'm going to sip on it every 20 minutes, and by the end of practice, that Gatorade is going to be empty, right? That's my daily intention. That's going to hold me accountable to this concept of nutrition that I've made a commitment to, recovery. It's meaningful for me, and that's how I'm going to do it every single day. These things should be easy, repeatable. You can do them every day, and somewhere that you can see them so that you can check them off and be like, I did it. I feel really good about that. And you'll be surprised how beneficial and rewarding it is to check those boxes. This is not just for athletics, by the way. You know, the recommendations for helping people form habits to motivate themselves as adults: start the day by making your bed, doing the dishes, doing the laundry. Little easy things that show initiative, they help you have a victory, like, okay, I'm starting the day off productively instead of just sitting on the couch for an hour and scrolling through my phone. Gives you motivation, gives you dopamine. It actually reinforces behavior. So this is just another example of that. It's true for kids as much as it's true for adults. So you'd be surprised how rewarding it will be when you check those boxes, okay? All right, so what is one accountability concept, a daily thing that you're going to hold yourself accountable to that you plan to implement starting today or tomorrow? Am I, like, if I go over 10, is that okay? Am I? I'll try and make the goal setting.
Thank you, Colgate. I didn't have the tissues and stuff. Even though I pointed them out to you twice.
Practice, stretch, drink water every day, sleep. Yeah, keeping track of practice times is huge. It's huge. You may chuckle at that, but that is absolutely something that will change your weekly outlook. That if you're somebody who gets lost with a practice schedule, that figuring out an organizational strategy that works for you will help you. Yeah, be more efficient with the little things, putting on sunscreen, getting ready to get in the water.
I know, Roshan, putting on.
It'll take 20 minutes to
Okay, so I know some of those things you guys laugh at, but if for an athlete, like making that a 5-minute process instead of a 20-minute process is actually implemented, that's going to make a difference. That's going to change the benefit of those training sessions weekly, monthly, over the course of the season. These are great examples. We see things like touching the wall with 2 hands every time. If you do that for a week, for a month, eventually you won't even need to think about it anymore. You can take it off the list because now it's a habit. Now it's something that you do automatically. And that's really the goal, right? You can work through these accountability checklist items and change them over time as some of these things become so routine that you no longer need to hold yourself accountable to them because they're automatic for you. You always go to practice. You always bring in Gatorade. Now I don't even need to write it down. I'm going to pick something else. And maybe it's something more complicated, like taking 3 dolphin kicks off every wall. Or maybe it's something like I'm going to stop scrolling through my phone 2 hours before I go to bed. Starting, though, with things that seem like low-hanging fruit is perfect. You have to start somewhere where you feel like I can actually implement this, see the success, feel good about yourself, and then what typically happens is you go, I can probably handle more. I think I can add more goals. And you do, and now you're changing. You're implementing change over time, which is something that it's not just hard for athletes, it's hard for adults too. It's a really valuable skill set. So these are great examples, okay? So, what does this look like? How do I put it all together? This is an example of a goal sheet that I have built out for swimmers specifically. And it connects these concepts together. So we have the event. I put phase as well because it helps to inform my short-term versus long-term goals, right? Maybe in November, my short-term goal is to add 2 seconds from my best time, but no more than that. And maybe my December goal is to drop 2 seconds from my personal best time. So having tiered goals or having time-specific goals, short-term and long-term like we discussed, all put in the same place so that you have objectives in October, November, December, etc., and you're not fixating solely on the end of season goal that you're really excited for, right? We have the time, and then the splits. This is such a big part of that 1250 set that I showed you, right? The value of long-term goals is that when you know what the long-term goal is, I want to go 155 turner free, then you can start to break it down into smaller pieces. I know if I want to go 155 turner free, I need to average 29 fives on my last 350s. So now, when I go to practice, I have this number in my head that has meaning. 29.5 on 200 pace 50s on 15 seconds rest is a number that I need to be hitting if I want to go 155. 29.5 times 2 is going to be 59.0. I want to be able to go 59 O's on 100s freestyle. This is so important to know. You don't know it if you don't know what the goal is, and then if you don't break down the goal into smaller pieces. But now, instead of being the swimmer who's like, Coach, I don't understand. I want to go 155. I'm going 2 minutes in the turner free at my paper. You're like, I don't get it. Well, what's missing? I feel like I come to practice, I work hard. Now you can reflect and be like, I never go 29 fives. I go 31 O's all the time when I go 50s freestyle in practice. That doesn't mean that you can't go 155, but it means that that goal is not a goal that you're ready for at that point, or maybe you're not doing these things, the action steps, the process goals that are required to make that possible. But it also is, so while that can be frustrating, like gosh, I didn't get it, it's also really motivating to know that I can change this. When you think about it broadly, like, oh, I went to practice, I worked hard, and I didn't go 155, you feel lost, you feel hopeless. Like, I can't, how am I ever going to go 155? It feels like I'm doing everything right. But when you understand the specifics that are required to go 155, then you can start charting a path that's like, oh, actually, I can change these 5 things, and I think I could actually get there. So now there's hope, there's motivation, instead of feeling frustrated and lost. So that's why it's so important to understand those numbers, the relationship, to practice, and then to reflect on what are the things I need to do to get better to make those numbers possible for myself. So that's the last part of this, are the action steps, right? And so I think a really good way to do this activity is to start off with like broad concepts. Things like, I want to get better underwater, I want to get better at my endurance. You reflect on what's necessary to be successful, in this case, in the turner free. All right, so what's the turner free have? Turner free is an event that's a middle distance event, so I need to be able to finish it strong. I know I need to be able to have early speed, and I need to be powerful because it's a middle distance event. I know that I need to have some ability to kick underwater. I know that I need to work on my breathing because my coach says I cross over in my breath or my breath is late. So I think broadly about what are the things that I could get better at to help me be faster than turner free, and then I break them down into measurable process goals. So the action steps should directly correlate with the process goal that is adjacent to it. So if my action step is, in order to go 155, I know that I need to descend the last 350s from 30.0 to 29.5 to 29.0. Then that means I need to improve my endurance or my stamina. How do I do that? I'm going to work on moving from the 115 interval to the 110 interval. I'm going to work on doing all 2100s instead of doing 15 of them and skipping 5. These are all examples of process goals that I can set that I know will improve my endurance, which will help me be more likely to see that transition from second to third to fourth 50. Or I want to be more consistent underwater in my dolphin kicking. What am I going to do? I'm going to commit to taking 3 to 5 dolphin kicks off every single long practice, no matter what the set. That way, when I do the turn free, I will automatically take 3 underwater dolphin kicks because there's no time when I'm in the pool that I don't take at least 3 underwater dolphin kicks. So it basically becomes impossible for me not to take at least 3 in my race, right? Or I know that I want to hold 29.5s as an average. So when we do sets of 50s, 10 50s on the 50, I know that I need to push myself to try and hold 29.5s. I know that if I'm going 31.0s and I feel like I've got a little bit more in the tank, then I need to work harder. I know that if I'm going 28.5s, that I should feel really confident behind the blocks before I swim the turn free. And I should not be afraid and think I can't go 155 because I see that number every single day in practice, so that gives me confidence that I can perform. It informs the mental part of the sport, right? So that's the value, in my mind, of starting with the outcome goals, with the long-term goals. What do I want to do? Breaking it down into smaller pieces and understanding the components of the goal, and then setting process goals and daily actions that will help me get there. And you guys said your daily actions, so you can think about that daily action worksheet as something that should inform all of these process goals that you have for your specific events. And I would encourage you to do this activity for maybe your 5 or 7 favorite or best events. You can do it for different phases of the season. So my short-term goals are going to be 157, my long-term goal is 155, and then you have this somewhere where you see it consistently so you can hold yourself accountable on a daily basis. All right? So in sort of summary in terms of these goals, and then I'll talk just really briefly about logging before we do college stuff really quickly. You want to make sure that this goal process can hold you accountable. So you need to make sure that these goals are visible in some capacity, somewhere where you see them. If you just write down 155 in the splits and then you put it into like your desk somewhere and you never see it again, then you're going to forget that 29.5 is what you're supposed to be holding. You're going to forget that you need to take 3 to 5 dolphin kicks off every wall. But if it's on your gear bag and it's laminated, or if it's on your mirror in your bathroom, or if you told your friends, I want to go 155, I need to hold 29.5s, then you're going to be held accountable by your friends, by your mirror, by the thing that's on your gear bag, by your coaches. So that way, you're reminded, and on the hard days, somebody, yourself internally, your training partner, your coach, is going to be like, hey, I know it's really hard today, I know you're really tired, but you're going 30.8s, and I really think you can go 30.3 if you push yourself a little bit harder. I've been coaching long enough to know that, like, certain moments, certain athletes, spoken to in the right way, that can be a difference. The 100 flyer girl that I shared with you, the one that went 55, there were practices where I would say, Annabelle, I think you can go 29 on this next 50 fly. And then she would, right? So sometimes being told, I think there's a little bit more there, you're able to dig deep, but it helps to know that 30.5s is where she is, 29.9s is where she wants to be. Hey kid, I think you can go 29.9s. Try it, see what you can do. Sometimes you surprise yourself. But it helps if you have people to hold you accountable. Be flexible, okay? As I said, and I showed you, the path is not straight. So I showed you the 3 examples of the 3 swimmers. Some of them went faster than the time, some went slower, some went the same. The mistake, this is very analytical, but the mistake that swimmers make is thinking like it's a math equation. It's not that simple. There's a logical element to this, there's an analytical component, but it's also very individualized. It's very complicated. Adaptation is complicated. You're growing, there are days that you're tired from school, you're stressed from home. So, and everybody's doing the same practices, but not everyone responds to practice the same way. So no matter what plan you set, you're never gonna hit it perfectly. But it's all about being in the ballpark, in the boundaries. So being aware of the number 29.5 means that you know 30.0, 29.0, those are all good numbers, they're in the ballpark. Going 35s is not in the ballpark. So now you at least know that, all right, 35s is, I'm definitely not on the right track. Taking 0 underwater dolphin kicks is nowhere near taking 5. So be flexible. This is called the psychological flexibility, is really important when it comes to goal setting. Be patient with yourself and change your goals if you need to. If you feel like the goal is unattainable in the short term, or you feel like you have a setback, you get hurt, you get sick, it's okay. Change the goal. The value of the goal is that it provides meaning to the day-to-day. The value of the goal is not just to make the goal in and of itself. Make sure that the goals are challenging but attainable. All right? If you're going 155 turn free, 135 turn free in 2 months is probably not an attainable goal. And the problem with a goal like that, as cool as it sounds as you write it down on paper, is that you're going to quickly realize that it's not a realistic goal, and then you're not going to be motivated by that goal. Okay? The two types of goals that don't help us are goals that are too easy or too difficult. If the goal's too easy, then you don't have to do any of the daily actions in order to achieve it. If your goal is, let's say like you just went 5,700 free, and your goal at your next taper meet is to go 58,500 free, you could not go to practice consistently and still go 58.5. So that's not a helpful goal. But if you make your goal 5,200 free, then you're going to tell yourself very quickly, like, I'm not going to get that goal. So what's the point of going to practice? What's the point of doing these dolphin kicks? So you lose motivation from goals that are too hard just as easily as you lose motivation from goals that are too easy. And remember, if you do have like this big goal that you really want to achieve, break it into small pieces. You want to go 53 and you're going 57, that's great. You can do that. But you need to go 56, and then 55, and then 54, and then you can go 53. So make each of those a goal, all right? And then just remember to make this an informed process. So learn, ask your coaches, right? What's a realistic expectation in October? I've been talking about these expectations because I know them, because I've been in the sport for a long time, but I understand that as a swimmer, as a parent, you might not realize that going a best time in October isn't realistic for a 15-year-old girl who's not wearing a tech suit. So learn about that stuff. When are the times that it's most likely that an athlete's going to perform? Learn about the differences between kids that taper really well and see a lot of improvement because they have more muscle, because they get more fatigue, versus kids that adapt more quickly because they're more endurance oriented, because they have more lean muscle mass. Girls are different than boys, the physiological differences between the genders. Understanding the sport will help you be more informed about what realistic expectations are and how long it's going to take to get where you want to go, and the things that you need to do to get there in the first place. All right? Okay, so finishing up, what's one process goal that you think would be really helpful for you to focus on? Yeah, that's fine. You can always do the goal setting later. For college, yeah. So that's such a compelling topic. Yeah. So moving towards a faster interval, it's a good process, fairly good process goal. You want to think about how you're going to do that, right? From 9 to 12, that's an excellent process goal. Measurable, right? It's attainable because it's only 3 more than you're currently taking. So that's a great one. Not taking your breath in the walls, excellent process goal. Very measurable, yes or no. Did I take the breath or did I not? And it connects to your long-term goals. Pass the first shallow underwater, same thing. It's measurable, it's a specific location that you can get to. You can say, I did get there, I didn't get there, I came up 2 meters short versus 4 meters short. And if you do find yourself like, I can never get to the yellow, it's so far, then maybe that's too big of a goal, right? And you just make it a little smaller. I want to come up 2 kicks short of the yellow, and then I'll get to 1 kick short, and then I'll get there. See what else we have here. Yeah, this is awesome. I love this, right? Because we talk about things like kicking. It's like, well, what can we do in practice to make our kicking better? Well, we can be intentional about the kick sets themselves. So I'm going to take 4 kicks down, 1 kick up for kick with a board. Right, for right. Right. So drills that are specific to getting better at the concept or being better in the kick set itself. Those are awesome process goals that you should think about. A good example that I use a lot is breaststrokers and timing, right? If your kick is late and someone told you, hey, you're kicking late, there are drills like 1 stroke under, 1 stroke up, moose drill. Those are drills that help improve your timing. So your process goal could be every day in warm-up, I'm going to do 4 laps of moose drill to work on my breaststroke kick timing. So now, instead of going to the meet and your coach being like, you gotta work on your kick timing, and you go home and your parents like, what did the coach say? You're like, I need to get better at my kick timing. And then you just go back to practice and nothing changes. Now you can connect that to, coach says I need to get better at my kick timing, and I'm going to, starting next practice, do moose drill every day for 425s to start working on that thing that I know is gonna help me get there. So it's just taking that 1 more step, or those 2 more steps, of taking the concept that you know you wanna get better at and making it into an action item that you're gonna do every single day to actually be better at that thing, so that 3 months from then, when you get to the meet, your coach says, your kick timing is so much better. And you're like, I know, because I do moose drill every single day in practice for 3 months, right? And that's where we want to go. That's what success looks like in this sport. Okay? So then the very last thing, and then I'll take questions, we'll be done for today, we'll save college for another day, is a really nice thing to complement your goals with is a training log, right? Because the goals are great, because they tell you where you want to go, but the log will tell you, am I actually doing the things that I said I'm going to do? So an accountability checklist and a training log, along with goals, will give you intention behind your daily action. So these are the things that I encourage. This is a training log that I made. I'll send this as well so that you can think about using it. These are the things I think are very helpful to have. Information about the session. What was your perceived exertion? How hard was the set for you? Was it very easy? Were you work at a low level of intensity? Was it very intense for you? That's helpful to know, like, how do I respond on hard days versus easy days? How are my splits and sets? How well do I do the details? Objective measures. I always leave some extra boxes so you can pick things that you specifically want to focus on, but some really good ones for swimming. Intervals that I made on a set today, pace times that I hit, stroke count, underwater kick count, all things that we've already talked about today. Maybe there's other things that you objectively want to include, how many times you didn't breathe into the wall perhaps, something you can measure numerically or yes or no. Then subjective things too. We want to be able to figure out, like, how do we respond mentally to practices? So how do I feel I'm recovering? How do I feel in the water? What's my mindset like? Am I feeling confident? Am I feeling not so confident right now? The value of that is multifaceted. It's helpful to be able to connect, like it's November and I'm really tired and I'm kind of sick, and I notice that my mindset suffers when I'm in heavy phases of training, or if I'm getting sick, or if it's like really cold out, and you can recognize, okay, even though I'm feeling a little bit less confident right now, it's not necessarily that there's something wrong. This is a normal pattern for me, so I'm not going to get frustrated by it. I'm just going to kind of keep the course. Or you might notice, like, all these subjective measures have been very poor for like 2 weeks now. Something might be up. Maybe I need to take a day off. Maybe I need to talk to my coach and like take an easier practice. Maybe there's something going on at school that is like really stressing me out. I need to attend to that so that eventually I can get these numbers back up again. You can diagnose an issue before it happens. The swimmer that I shared with you that made the 10200 breaststroke time, she was a swimmer, very muscular girl, very hard worker, very hard on herself. I had her do this a lot so that we could have a dialogue about when she needed to recover. And so there were times where she was feeling mentally, emotionally, physically drained. She was struggling with the pace times of practice or the intervals. And because we were logging this information, we could have a conversation. I would say, hey, you know what? I want you to take the rest of the mornings off this week. I want you to go on a slower interval for this set. I don't want you to worry about going 33s on the 1250s today. I want you to go backstroke instead of breaststroke. We're going to get off your breaststroke, give you a little bit of recovery. And that was really important because she's the type of athlete that if we weren't monitoring those things, she could get really, really, really fatigued to the point that it would affect her ability to swim well at her taper meets. So by having that information consistently logged on a daily basis, we were able to catch things proactively instead of reactively. And that's the objective. And then from a psychological component, we want to be motivated by recognizing things we need to get better at. So I like having 3 things you can improve on every day. But also, a lot of swimmers really struggle to see things that they do well, right? And so having a hard time with confidence is often preceded by, I never feel like I do anything well. And I work with plenty of athletes that feel that way about themselves. This can be really hard to do for those types of swimmers. And it's probably one of the most important things that you can do as an athlete if your confidence is low, is I need you to find a way to identify 3 things every day that you did well. Even if you missed the intervals, even if you didn't hit the pace times you wanted to hit, even if you felt terrible in the water, I still need you to say, I did a good job today because I showed up. I did a good job today because I did the whole set. I didn't quit. I did a good job today because I encouraged my teammate, even though I was frustrated that she was beating me in the set. Start seeing the positives so you have small wins, you can build your confidence and your motivation. And then on the second page, I always leave it blank for reflection, okay? The log is a really good way to self-regulate your emotions, right? A lot of us bottle up negative emotions. I am frustrated, I don't want to talk to my parents about it, I don't want to talk to my coaches about it, I don't want to admit that I'm frustrated with my swimming. You have no outlet for that, and then eventually it explodes. You exploded a teammate, you exploded a parent, you go to a meet, you have an anxiety attack. We need to have outlets for our emotions. We need to be able to communicate them in some capacity. Reflecting on a daily basis on, hey, you know what? Today was really frustrating. I feel lost. I feel like I'm nowhere near my goal time. I'm exhausted. I've never been this tired before. It helps you to label the emotions. All right, this is frustration. This is anger. This is fear. It helps you to identify and reflect on why it's happening. As you're writing that, you're like, yeah, you know, now that I think about it, like, I've never been this consistent in practices before. I might be really tired. Or I've been sick for like 2 weeks. Maybe I need to like take a little break, get some rest. I need to focus more on fluid intake, things like that. And maybe I can turn this around. The reflection is helpful to figure out what I can change. And the reflection is helpful for getting it out. And for some of us, that's a good first step towards processing those emotional states. So objective measures, subjective measures, and space for reflection. That way you can hold yourself accountable each day, and you can assess. Am I on track? Do I need to make changes? And you can adjust accordingly. Okay, so that's what I have. I know it's long, thank you for being patient. Any questions? Yes?
On the other slide, it said in water and then fed. What's that mean? And,
Which one?
not that one, not that one. Not that one.
Oh my gosh, was he just focusing on this one question the entire
The very beginning.
No, it's in the very end.
Oh, at the very end?
This one, it was last week.
He was thinking about this the entire
Oh,
presentation.
right here?
I'm just letting you know.
Oh,
He did not pay attention
in water
to a
field.
single thing.
Like, for example, how many of you sometimes feel good in the water versus bad in the water, right? Like, some days you feel good in the water, some days you feel bad, like there's pressure on the water, things like that. That's what that's in reference to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Yeah.
How do you figure out what like motivates you? And then one thing too that I also had in mind at the very beginning is like, how do you turn that motivation into discipline? Because I know discipline is like a bigger thing than motivation,
Yes.
but I don't know if it's like the same thing.
Good questions. So the first question, I think a good starting point is to reflect on 2 things. One, what are the things about myself that are most important? Your values. Maybe looking at a list of values is a good starting point. Be like, oh, that resonates with me, or that doesn't. Another way to do that is to think about what are the things that you do in your life that make you happy, right? And then reflect a little bit on why they make you happy. So going back to my example of the triathlons, I like doing triathlons because I've noticed that when I'm in the middle of this really big long run, I am made happy by the fact that I'm doing something difficult and I'm getting through it. So you can reflect on like whether it's talking to your friends, whether it's giving a presentation, whether it's like getting through a difficult set. When do I notice that I'm doing something really well? It makes me happy. Why does that make me happy? Is it because I'm mentally tough? Is it because I like to give back to other people? And then that's how you can figure that part out. And then how do you transition motivation into discipline? Well, it can be one or the other, right? So one part of that is the motivation itself encourages you to take action. So it's about slowing down and making a decision instead of just acting. So what I mean by that is, for example, nutritionally. Let's say that I really want to commit to drinking Gatorade at practice every day. Well, if I just go through the motions and do what I normally do, I show up to practice, I don't have the Gatorade, or I am in the middle of the set, my stomach hurts and I don't drink it because that's what I always do and I don't want to drink it. But you take one more second and you remind yourself, I want to commit to this. I'm motivated by the desire to be better nutritionally. Then you make a different choice. You say, oh, you know what? I'm going to drink it anyways. Or I'm going to bring the Gatorade to practice today. Noticing for just a moment that, oh gosh, this is an opportunity for me to either act towards my goal or act away from my goal. That I'm going to act towards my goal is the first step towards making something that's motivation, discipline. But the other thing is the act of doing gives us motivation. So committing to like the accountability checklist, for example, is actually a really powerful motivational tool. So when it talks like habit strength for an adult who's like, I want to start eating, I'm going to pack my lunch and eat a salad every day at lunch instead of eating out. The act of doing it once feels good. It's reinforcing. You're like, oh, I did it. The hardest part is making the choice to do it once. And then the next day, it feels a little easier, and the next day it feels a little easier. So having a checklist and doing the things, the hardest part will be actually doing them once, but once you check that list off, all 10 things, the next day, I promise you, you're gonna feel like it's a little easier, more motivating to do those things. So it can work in either direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah.
I was going to say, the importance of a logbook, and I only know that there's a handful of you guys who really do it. And in the past, we used to do it out, waiting for our parents to come, but I really felt like that's an accountability thing, and it's something that is not just about swimming, it's really about life. You could ask Zach, does he keep his own logbook? Yes. Keeping a journal of what's going on every day in our lives is an outlet, and it's a really important habit. And I can't tell you how, like, that was just something my coaches, 3 or 4 Olympic coaches that I've had, all from the time I was 10, 11 years old, we did logbooks. And again, it's like you said, it's a habit. But once you get in the habit, Samantha, Surrey, I mean, I know there are some kids, when I come in with those test set results that I type up and spend, 400 or 500 times on those sheets, there's a whole bunch of you guys who grab them. And there's a whole bunch of you guys who just discard them, right? But if you are keeping a logbook and you really care, really truly want to get those times, you need to be looking at those times and seeing, hey, am I getting there? Am I not getting there? And what do I need to do to keep this going or keep it up? So I'm just trying to reinforce, he's reinforcing everything that we try to do, but he's spot on with these logbooks, you guys. This is so important.
You probably know Caleb Dressel. His coach at Florida, Greg Troy, he's the head coach of Florida for decades. And he coached Lochte, and he coached Dressel, and he coached Elizabeth Beisel. And it's mandated in Florida. You have to have a logbook. You have to give your logbook to Troy. If you don't get the practice. So it is very much embedded within the approach of the sport's most successful athletes is to have a process for recording on a daily basis, yes.
In your regular log, in a swim logbook, can you put other things from the day that doesn't have to do with swimming in the
Yeah.
same logbook?
It's a great question because it's your book. And so while everything I provide is a template, it's meant to be like, all right, where do I start? But then you want to make it your own. Make it make sense for you. And you're a little younger than some of them, so your logbook should probably look a little different than the older kids. It should be more simple, so that it's something you can do consistently. Any other questions? Thank you for being patient. I know it was a longer talk. I appreciate it. I'll take your question after. You can tell me. All right, you guys are good. Enjoy the day. Anything with sugar and salt. Oh, no, no.
Okay. I couldn't